Please be seated. The court is now in session. As we scheduled, today the Chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the civil party Kim Wan-di, and after its conclusion, the Chamber will hear a witness, that is TCW 247. Mr. Dutchparry, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceeding? Dutchparry, good morning, Mr. President. All parties to this case are present, except the accused Ieng Sari, who is present in the holding cell downstairs due to his health reason. The civil party, Mr. Kim Wan-di, is present in the courtroom. As for the reserved witness for today, that is TCW 247, has confirmed that through his knowledge and ability, he has no relation by blood or by law through any of the three accused or any of the civil parties recognized by the Chamber. This witness also took an oath this morning. This witness does not have a duty counsel. The greffier also noticed the presence of Isabel de Rong, an international lawyer for civil parties who has not yet been recognized by the trial chamber. Thank you. President, thank you. The chamber has heard the participants and the attendance of the parties and individuals to this proceeding, and there is a new international civil party lawyer who has not yet recognized by the chamber in the proceedings in this case. We need to complete this procedure first upon the request by the national lead co-lawyer before we continue the commencement of hearing the testimony of Kim Wan-di pursuant to Internal Rule 22(a). Mr. Pech Ong, the national lead co-lawyer for civil parties, be on his feet to request for the recognition of the international civil party lawyer, and who has not yet been recognized by the trial chamber. Mr. Pech Ong, you may take the floor. Pech Ong, Mr. President, Your Honors, good morning everyone in and around the courtroom. Sitting behind me is Madame Isabel de Rong. She is a member of the Toulouse Bar Association in France. She has been recognized by the Bar Association of Cambodia and has her name registered on the 27th of June 2008, and she also took an oath before the Court of Appeals on the 16th of July 2009. She is one of the lawyers in the Lawyers Without Border of France. We request for Your Honor's recognition so that she can perform her duty before this chamber. I'm grateful, Your Honor. Mrs. Isabel Durand, please stand. Mrs. Isabel Durand, you are hereby recognized as an international civil party lawyer for the purpose of the proceedings before this chamber. In the case 002, pursuant to this recognition, you have the same right and privilege as the national lawyers for civil party. You can be seated. Mr. Angodom, you may proceed. Angodom, good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. And good morning, the audience in the public gallery. Today, that is the 6th of December 2012, I believe the Chamber and my team has received a medical report of my client that for the general situation, my client is stable. He can sit, for instance, but he feels fatigue easily with a slight movement. He complains that he did not sleep well last night and that he can sit for long. Request that he be allowed to stay in the holding cell downstairs. I'd like to make some remarks regarding this medical report. Only a physician make the recommendation that my client can sit, physically can sit, but there is no assessment as whether he is fit mentally to participate in the proceeding, since there is no medical report from any of the experts. And we, as the defense team for Mr. Ieng Sary, request the Chamber to appoint an expert to make an assessment of Mr. Ieng Sary, whether he is fit mentally to participate in the proceeding, so that we can be sure that my client can do so. And my second remark is that in the case that Mr. Ieng Sary falls asleep, the case manager shall wake him up. Regarding this point, in the contract of my case manager, there is no duty for him to perform this function, that is to wake my client up. His duty is to deal with the work in his office, but he cannot do this on a regular basis. And another point is that although Mr. Ieng Sary is woken up, he is awake for maybe only 1 minute and he will fall asleep again. And the third point, if he is waken up, is it the work that shall be done by the doctor or whether it has any medical impact? Because as we notice, if we go to visit a patient at a hospital, there usually would be a time allowed for such a visit, as patients need to have some time to rest and to sleep. And if there is a case that my case manager wakes him up and my client has a heart attack, is it the responsibility of my case manager for such an event? These are some of the remarks that I'd like to make to the Chamber for your consideration, and I'm grateful, Your Honor. President, the prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to be brief. We're in a slightly disadvantaged position because we don't receive the reports, but I'm going to proceed on the basis of what my learned friend just said. And again, very briefly in response, nothing that we heard this morning engages the trial chamber's discretion or obligation to appoint further expert or to require further expert opinion. The issues that my learned friend discussed have to do with ways in which one might manage Ieng Saree's well-being and participation from the holding cell. And to quote my friend, he said there was no assessment of his mental capacity. Well, there has been a recent assessment, an assessment that found that Mr. Ieng Saree is capable of following and participating in the proceedings. Your Honours have accepted that assessment and affirmed that Ieng Saree is capable of participating. And of course, as Your Honours are fully aware, the international principles that you've applied don't require an accused to be monitored on an hour-to-hour basis to ascertain any changes in how his condition evolves, for as long as there is no indication that a fitness issue has arisen. There is no need to appoint further experts and to engage in further inquiries as to fitness to stand trial. Having said that, I want to also obviously affirm that just as everyone in this courtroom, the co-prosecutors are concerned to ensure that all accused receive proper medical care. Your Honours have made provision for that. Our submission is that it is in your discretion to consider information you receive from the doctors, as you've recently held information given by counsel. Might be informative, but it's certainly not something that you can act upon by way of evidence. And for as long as the information you're receiving is not requiring you to, as long as that information is sufficient and is not requiring you to open further inquiry, the matter should end there. And lastly, as to my learned friend's comments on the obligations of the case manager, it's interesting that my learned friend asserts that it's not the case manager's job to assist Ieng Saree, perhaps by waking him up. But by the same token, the defence have required the case manager to record on an almost minute-by-minute basis Ieng Saree's condition in the holding cell. It's entirely reasonable, we would submit, to require any member of a defence team to consult with their client to check and to discuss with medical staff his condition, to see whether he is asleep, whether he requires assistance. There is absolutely nothing improper about that. And those are our submissions this morning.
President, the international lead co-lawyer, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Let me add one or two words to what has just been said from the prosecution bench. While we think it is quite right that we should seriously discuss the capacities of Mr. Ieng Saree, we do believe that sufficient information has been given to us so far as to whether he is asleep for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, half an hour, who's waking him up, who's not waking him up. We find it rather shocking that we have this discussion every morning, and we believe that this discussion is simply not pertinent to the real stakes of this trial. Out of respect for the civil parties and for the public, we would like the Chamber to bring a close to these daily discussions, which strike us as being both irrelevant and disrespectful. Thank you.
President, Counsel and Madam, you may proceed. And Madam, thank you, Mr. President. Of course, we do not want to waste the court's time every morning, not as claimed by the prosecution. Our wish is for our client, Mr. Ieng Saree, to fully participate in the proceedings. And the only solution to that is to appoint an expert to make a medical assessment. That is, an expert who has specialty in the mental assessment of my client. And if we have such an expert medical report, then it's easy for us to proceed on and make a decision on this case. And in fact, if it is possible, we also would like to have a mental medical assessment on a daily basis by an expert. As we have had so far, the medical report by Dr. John Campbell was done for a 2-day assessment of my client only. So we cannot say for sure that such a report is accurate, or it could be accurate at the time, but not at the present day, as the situation of my client is precarious and changes every day. Of course, it is not our intention to delay the court's time. And to solve this issue is for the Chamber to act upon our request. Thank you. President, I'd like to give the floor to Judge Cartwright to respond to the request made by Counsel Angadam, the defense counsel for Ian Sari. Please take the floor, Judge Cartwright.
Thank you, President. The trial chamber has conferred and rules as follows. The ruling of yesterday stands. There is no new medical information that would justify any intervention on the part of the trial chamber. The chamber notes, however, that this is the first time that Ieng Sari has made the claim of some mental impairment. If it wishes to proceed with such an application, it must make its application in writing. The Chamber will not hear oral applications every morning before the trial begins, unless there is something exceptional or new. The Chamber has the medical report from the doctor, and it observes that nothing has changed since yesterday. That is the ruling of the Chamber. Thank you.
Counsel Angadam, thank you, Judge Cartwright, for the ruling. Of course, I respect the ruling, but I do not agree to it. President, the matter has been ruled. You may be seated. The floor is now given to the lead lawyers for civil parties to continue putting questions to this civil party. You are advised that you have only 40 minutes, a combined time for your team and for the prosecution. So please try to use the time between the two teams effectively. Tisrina, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors, and good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. Good morning, Mr. Kambandi. Yesterday, you stated that your father had his hands tied to the bed and he was taken and executed. How many of those people who came to arrest your father, and what were they, and did you know any of them? Response: when my father was arrested, he was arrested by two men, but I did not know the rank or the name of the two people. They were black uniformed, they had a scarf on their waist, and they carried two guns, and they walked my father until I could no longer see him. And then I turned my eyes to tender the cows. Question: after your father was taken away and killed, what happened to your mother and your siblings? Response: after my father was killed, my mother and other siblings knew of what happened. My mother cried and everyone was sad. We kind of had a small gathering amongst the family members quietly, and we wanted to know the reason why he was killed. We did not know when the militiamen or those people came to sneak at our house. Actually, our house was under a coconut tree, and one of my younger sisters said that we had to be careful because the coconut could fall onto the house. But I told her not to worry and to sleep. So we tried to stay separately and not to make them aware that we had a meeting, or we could be accused of being the children of the traitor. That's how I can recall it. Question: you stated that after your father was killed, your family was monitored. What other activities did they do toward your family? Response. Yes. They then called a meeting for all the 17 April people, and my mother was instructed to pack our belongings so that we would be transferred to the work site. At that time, I did not even know what a work site meant. At that time, it was called Prek Padau Dam. I do not know whether that dam's name has been changed. It was a very large dam. And my mother, who just delivered her baby recently, was forced to carry soil as ordinary people, as healthy people. She protested, but then the 18 April people and the measurement said that she had too much personal properties, and that she would not fit within the criteria of Angka. That is due to this thick ownership rights. Question: you said that your mother recently delivered a baby. How long ago did she deliver the baby? And what kind of work was assigned to her? Whether the work load was as same as for other healthy people?
Response. After delivering a baby for 3 months, my mother was made to dig some dirt and build the dam. The dam was about 10 meters in width, and they used human beings to build the dam. They did not care whether the workers had just delivered the baby recently or not. They treated everyone equally when it comes to labor force. And my mother was subject to this hard work, and my younger sibling also could not make it, and she died because of the overwork. I could say that death during the regime was very pathetic, because during the previous regime, when people died, there would be some traditional ceremonies where Buddhist monks would be there to attend the ceremonies. But during this Khmer Rouge regime, when someone died, he or she would be buried or covered with some leaves. They die like the dead animals. Question: apart from the execution of your father, did you observe also that other former Lonol officials were spied on? Response: it happened to the workers. During each meeting, there would be an appeal through commune chief, the person by the name No, who would say that everyone who had worked before should come forward and have their names registered so that they could be sent to work with Angka at a higher level. That's what we heard through the meeting. And many people were convinced, although they were convinced by the appeal, although I did not remember how many of them exactly have their name registered. People could be heard talking to one another whether they have their name registered or not. Some would just say that they would do that at a later date. They would wait for a while, things like that. Question. Can you tell the chamber, please, if you remember whether people died at your area and what could have been the cause of their death? Response. So far as I remember, some people died from malnutrition, and they also died from being illy treated without proper medicine, for example. And some were accused of betraying Angkar because they had to steal food. And if Angkar found out they did so, then they would be arrested and executed. I once was engaged in stealing the rice grain. I was sleeping on the dike and I had to eat the grains of rice raw. And then on one occasion, the people was talking that they noted that some people were suspicious to have been stealing rice from the paddy field because they could follow the trace of the footsteps. But they believed that the footsteps belong to human being, but the excrement or the droppings appear to be belonging to the animals. Indeed, we ate some kind of brand that it's no doubt that the droppings somehow was those of animals dropping rather than human beings. Question. You said that the Khmer Rouge would be observing or monitoring the activity of the villagers or workers. Can you tell the chamber whether it was the case that those who were under surveillance were mainly people of the 17th of April or the new people rather than the base people? Response. At that time, the militia, the Khmer Rouge militia, would set up their network searching for the 18th of April 1975, and they would follow us. For example, they would observe every moment a movie made, and they would ask to find out what we did in the past. They would trick us to answer to them, for example, what our profession, occupation could have been. They would exchange this information with some food if we would like to do that. But I felt it was not right to tell them these details. I knew something went wrong. Although I was very young, I told my mother not to tell anyone any details because we lost our father already, and I told her that I would not wish to lose her also. Question. during the time when you had been living during the regime, indeed, have you ever heard people mention the names of some individuals, including Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, Ieng Sary, for example? If so, where did this happen? Response. I remember that on one occasion after lunch, I saw or I heard from people who talked at the communal eating hall that there would be a film show in Kampot location, which was about 12 kilometers from our location, and some people would take the ox carts to see the movie, and indeed the film was shown. I was there as well. I didn't see the movie clearly, but I heard that people had to. I heard from the movie some names were mentioned. I couldn't hear this very clearly because it was rather noisy. People were talking while watching the movie, so I couldn't understand quite well what was clearly said during the movie. Question. Do you still remember what was the movie about? Response. I don't remember what the film was about, but I know that I remember part of the movie which was about the liberation of the country. I heard from the movie that the country was liberated from the yoke of the imperialists, and that the country was under construction. And I was rather exhausted after a long day at work. I fell asleep when the movie was still being shown. Question. Do you still recall whether the names of individuals I mentioned were mentioned in that film? Response. I heard the names being mentioned, but I was very young to take good notice of this. There was a man behind this film who was saying out loud into the loudspeaker, pretending to impersonate the actors in the film, and I heard these names mentioned. I could not find out where this gentleman could have been sitting, but I heard from the loudspeaker that was hoisted up above on top of one of the trees in the area. Question. Mr. President, with your leave, I would like to use the document that I already mentioned yesterday. Document D22/1352, please. The President, you may proceed. However, please tell the Chamber how much time would you like to use to pose question to this civil party because it appears to the chamber that time's almost running out for your team. Council Tisrina, thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, I have the final question to put concerning this document, and I will then cede the floor to the prosecution. The President, you may proceed. Council Tisrina, I would like to refer to document under ERN in Khmer 00526168, English ERN 00866008. And again, this document is available only in Khmer and English. By mid-1978, you said, your family, with 5 members, including your mother, your younger siblings, and cousin, mom, and some other groups of people, mainly the families whose husbands or fathers had been executed. The people, including your family, had been sent to the cooperative in the province in Bakan district. At Bakan district cooperative, the living condition was worse. We were given only very thin gruel for each meal. I would like to seek some clarification concerning this statement. You said that your family and other families whose members or whose husbands and father had been executed who went to that cooperative with you. Is it my understanding or our understanding that these group of people whose fathers or husbands had been executed were those of the 17th of April people? Response. After leaving my place in Cambodia for Posat, the 18th April people had some vehicles where they could travel along, and for our groups, for our families and other people, they had to carry their luggage and walk. And we had to walk to National Road number 3 all the way to Cardamom mountain line. I still remember the road where we walked, and we spent some time there. And I also noted that my children and my mother were too exhausted walking, after walking for a long time. And then we asked one of the vehicles to stop. And the vehicle belonged to the Chinese people. Although I couldn't read Chinese characters, but I knew that this car was a truck. This vehicle was a truck, and we were offered a lift after all. Council Tisrina, I am sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Sawopati. Indeed, I am seeking some clarification concerning this particular statement. You said that your family, along with other families, in particular the families whose parents, or rather whose fathers or husbands had been executed. Were these people the 17th of April people, or were they the base people? Can you please answer my question? If you remember, Or if you know how to answer this, you may proceed. If you not, it is fine. Response. I remember briefly these people were the 17th of April people, the remaining members of the family who survived the execution, and some of us had to walk and carried some luggage or belongings with us. Question: so is it fair to say that these people were the 17th of April people? Response: yes, they were, because the 18th of April people would not be walking, they would be transported by vehicles. Council Tisrina: thank you, Mr. President and Your Honors. I have no more questions to put to this civil party, and with that I would like to cede the floor to the prosecution. The President, the co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning again, Your Honours. And good morning to you, Mr. Kim Bandi. Thank you for coming here to tell the court about your and your family's suffering. My name is Tariq Abdul Haq, and I will ask you only a few follow-up questions on behalf of the co-prosecutors. I just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding as to exactly where you were on the 16th and the 17th of April. And in the interest of time, if I can just summarize to you what I understood you to say yesterday, and if you can just confirm whether that's correct or if it's not, please correct me. I believe you said that you lived at Choi Changwa, which is in Muk Kompol district. This is adjacent to Phnom Penh, on the other side of the Choi Changwa bridge, a bridge that is known today as the Japanese bridge. On the 16th of April, you and your family crossed the bridge, entered Phnom Penh, and went to your uncle's house in Santo Mok suburb, and the following morning, on the 17th of April, you saw Khmer Rouge soldiers entering the city. I just want to make sure that I have that correct. If you could please let me know if that's a correct summary of those events.
Response. Yes, it is the correct statement I made, but I wish to also add that my home was on the other side of the river, in the opposite direction of the city.
Thank you very much. That's very useful. Now, for those who are not very familiar with the geography of Phnom Penh, if we could just try to place the Santo Mok area with a bit more precision. Do I understand correctly that this is a part of Phnom Penh that is close to the Russian Boulevard and also close to the To Kok area?
Response. Santo Mok is actually located on Cambodia Crown Boulevard.
Thank you very much. And now moving on to the event you described yesterday, very briefly, the killing of your uncle. According to my notes, I think you said that your uncle was wearing a military uniform at the time he was shot. and you said you opened the door when you heard the shots and you saw your uncle. As far as you know, from what you observed, was your uncle taking part at that point in time in fighting with the Khmer Rouge soldiers? Or to be even more specific, could you see whether he had a gun, whether he had actually been fighting against the Khmer Rouge soldiers that were coming into the city?
Response. What I saw was that he was lying dead. I did not know whether he had engaged in any fighting before that. But before Khmer Rouge reached Phnom Penh, he talked to his members of family and also overheard this, that in his capacity or with this rank of his, he would not be worried to engage any fighting because he could just render the order and his subordinates would do that on his behalf. So by the time before he died, he was riding a jeep wearing the military uniform. And later on, what we saw was that he was lying dead after being shot by a Khmer Rouge soldier.
Thank you. And if I can ask you just perhaps one or two more questions on that. If I understand it correctly, this happened on the 17th of April. Apart from the killing of your uncle, were you able to see whether there was other fighting taking place, or had the Lon Nol troops stopped resisting or fighting the Khmer Rouge at that point?
Response. Before the 17th of April 1975, which was the day before that, I saw Lon Nol soldiers engaged in the fighting with the Khmer Rouge soldiers. It was a fierce fighting during the last evening because fighting could be heard at every spearhead from the airport direction and Choi Chongwa location. So gunfires could be heard all across the city. After the bombs being dropped, and indeed it was rather quiet, we had to leave our home for our uncle's house. During that time, in the morning, there was no fierce fighting as it happened the day before. It was more like sporadic fighting.
Thank you. I'm going to move on in the interest of time to just ask you a few more questions on other topics. When you were describing your family's movement, first north across the Choi Changwa Bridge, and then later you talked or you described how your family went back to, or rather south, to the Kampot province, but you went via the area of Udong, and you said you stayed at the Udong market for 2 or 3 days. If you could be very brief on this, can you tell us whether the city of Udong, whether there were still people living there, as far as you could see, or whether people had left Udong, and whether the area was empty, if you like?
Response. After leaving Phnom Penh, we went to the ferry crossing place, and then we crossed the river to Odong, and we spent overnight because we had been too exhausted to go on. We had to stop for a while to regain our energy. I saw some people there. I did not know whether they were the 18th April people or the 17th of April people, but I saw a few of them.
Were you able to see whether people were living in houses like your family lived in your home and people in Phnom Penh before the 17th of April?
Response. I saw people living there, but it is difficult for me to say whether they were living normal life as what we did at home. I saw them wearing black clothes, wearing some hats. I can't exactly say whether they were civilians or soldiers.
Thank you. And I'll move on to another topic in the time we have remaining. You have described in detail your father's arrest and his disappearance. Can I ask you, I think you said he was in the Navy of the Lon Nol regime, if I understood correctly. Do you know what rank he had in 1975?
Prior to 1975, I knew that my father was a military officer in the Navy. He bore the rank of a colonel. He had his base near Wat Phnom. He also traveled to various other countries by military ship. And his name is Cambodia. And in fact, on the 30th of each month, he would have his subordinates coming to fetch my mother to go and get his salary at the base.
And perhaps just one more question in relation to your late father. In your application, you stated that he was taken to be killed in Wat Bong Ang Pagoda in Bong Ak Commune, Chuk District. Would you be able to tell us how you were able to, how you found out that information that your father was taken to this place?
When they arrested my father and later on killed him, no, the village chief told me when I asked him where they took my father through, and he said, how come this day you still use the word papa? You cannot use that word during this regime. You should use the local word puk for your father. I apologized to him and I asked where my father was taken through. He told me he was taken to Bong Ong Pagoda at Bang Chuk. So I thought he would be okay because he was taken to a pagoda. But later on, while I worked in a mobile unit at the Padau, I was in the economic section to carry water for the cook to use in their cooking. Then I saw the red ongkang fruit. I picked the fruits. And then I saw the clothes that my father wore. The clothes were tied onto that ongkang tree, and I was pretty sure that the clothes and the hat belonged to my father. And later on at night, I spoke to my mother quietly that I saw the clothes of my father, and she asked me not to speak about that anymore. And maybe the place where they cooked was on top of the pit that they used to kill people. And I asked the people at the kitchen what happened if it was a pit, and they said that it should be okay because we would be helped by the spirits of the dead.
Thank you, Mr. Kimbandi. And one last matter that I wish to ask you about, and if you could be very, very brief because we are running out of time. In your application, you also mentioned that another uncle of yours, whose name was Hung, and who was over 50 years of age, was killed by the Khmer Rouge in May 1975 in Angkor Che village, which is in Angkor Che commune in Kampot province. And you indicated that you received that information from your older cousin, No. Could you tell us, if you know, how your cousin received that information about the killing of your uncle, Hung?
I learned of the information of the killing of my uncle, Hong, in Kampot province by No. In 1979, No was a soldier of the front, and he actually went on his mission to Posat province. And through his contact with people, and as I did not have rice, I went to ask the front soldiers for rice, and I asked whether they knew my uncle, whose native village was at Angkor Che, and I was told that he was killed. And later on, after money was introduced and circulated, my mother went again to search for the truth. And we learned that all the properties of my uncle had been gone and that he was indeed killed.
And one final question. Was Hong also an officer or a soldier in the Lon Nol regime?
Hong was not a soldier. I don't know what he was referred to as, but in fact he was the chief of a commune.
Thank you, Mr. Kimbandi, for coming here and assisting us. We have no further questions, and Your Honours, thank you for the time allocated to us.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to Nuon Chia's defense to put questions to this civil party. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming, Mr. Civil Party. We have no questions for you. We wish you all the best. Thank you.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to Ieng Sari's defense to put questions to this civil party if you wish to do so. Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. And good morning, Mr. Kimbandi. My name is Anwadam, and to my right is my colleague Michael Canavas. We are defense counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari. At this stage, we do not have any questions for you. However, on behalf of my client, Mr. Ieng Sari, we wish you all the best and have a safe trip back home. Thank you, Mr. President. President, thank you. The floor is now given to Keo Sampon's defense to put questions to this civil party. Kung Sampon, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Keo Sampon's defense do not have any question for this civil party. Thank you. President, thank you. Mr. Kim Van Day, as we are approaching the conclusion of your testimony, you will be given an opportunity to make your statement of suffering and harms inflicted upon you during the Democratic Cambodia regime. If you wish to do so, you may proceed. Civil Party, Mr. President, I would like to read the statement that I had written quite some time ago. Mr. President, yes, you may do so. Civil Party. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to make my statement of suffering that my family and I encountered. That we encountered and experienced during the Khmer Rouge regime. Your Honours, I express the suffering as follows. My family and I suffered a lot during the Khmer Rouge regime. Let me first touch upon the physical suffering suffered by my family. We were moved to be away from our property, our house, and from the school. My family situation was like the rest of the people in the country. And it was the Khmer Rouge who did that. They inflicted that suffering upon my family and myself. We were forced to move away from our house. We were forced to engage in hard labor. We became too exhausted. We were starved. We were deprived of food, as in the case of other Cambodian people at the time, and as a result, my younger sister and many of my relatives died of starvation. It was miserable. They killed my father, they killed my great-uncle and my great-aunt, as well as many of my relatives, unjustly. As a result, at present, my mother became a widow and I became a child without a father. Every time I think of what happened, it seems so vivid living in front of my eyes. And it made me so angry, and as a result, I joined the army. I wanted to take revenge, but I did not succeed in that, so I had to sell my labor for a nominal fee to survive until the present day, until the day I die. Mr. President, Your Honors, please find justice and punish them appropriately in proportion to the loss that I incurred, as well as the loss of other Cambodian peoples. Please punish to the harshest degree as it is possible. And finally, I wish to express my gratitude and thanks to Your Honors and to everyone else inside and outside the courtroom. And I wish you all the best and grateful, Mr. President. President, thank you, Mr. Gambandi. The hearing of your testimony has now come to a conclusion, and you are now excused. Mr. Gambandi, your testimony may contribute to ascertaining the truth in this case. You are now free to return to your residence or wherever you wish to, and we wish you all the best and have a safe trip and peace in your life. Court officer, in cooperation with Visu Unit, please assist for the arrangement of this civil party to return to his residence or wherever he wishes to go to. Mr. Kimbandi, you may now leave the courtroom. President, the floor is now open to any other parties in this proceeding. If you wish to make any observation regarding the testimony of this civil party. It seems that no party wishes to make any observation. We will take a short break, and after we resume, we will commence the hearing of the testimony of a witness, that is TCW 247. We take a 20-minute break, and we shall return at 25 to 11.
សូមចេញក្រោកឈរ